welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm your host, Jessikah, and I'm here with the author of a book that, is this going to be the first in a series?
Yes, it is.
Very good. I'm excited because otherwise I would have been very disappointed by the cliffhanger it ended on. But it left me wanting to read more is basically what I'm saying. I wasn't disappointed in the book
Thank
itself
you.
at all. Yeah, Julia Bianco, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about which season?
So my name is Julia Bianco, and I am the author of Witch Season, which comes out on June 30th from St. Martin's Press in the US and Headline in the UK. And Witch Season is my debut novel, and it is an urban fantasy. It takes place in modern day Los Angeles, and it is about Catherine Barnes, who is the second in charge of Los Angeles's Estes Coven. And she is basically a witch enforcer. So it's her job to find witches who are breaking the rules and bring them to justice. And she works very closely with the head of Estes, who is her mentor, Sylvia Page, and they've had a very close relationship for much of Catherine's adult life. And they are both former unsettled witches, which is witches who are born to non-magical parents who get their powers in this explosive, often catastrophic burst as teenagers. And they've made it their mission to find other unsettled witches and bring them into the fold, which is something that Noctis, which is the New York-based coven that runs all of the witch covens in the United States, does not really approve of. And Catherine's life gets kind of upended when Silas Cautry, who is the son of the heads of Noctis, shows up in Los Angeles, and he's this kind of corporate, annoying, very handsome, very frustrating person who's come to take Estes to task for some of their more unconventional practices. And Catherine doesn't like him and she doesn't trust him, but she has to work with him after a very chaotic, mysterious event upends things in Los Angeles.
So where did the idea for the story come from for you?
For me, I think, I always would sit on my phone and I'm scrolling through the Libby catalog, or I'm walking through the library, and I was always looking for a book, and you're always looking for specific things in your books, and you're like, okay, here are the things that I want to read, and can I find a book that has this, 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 and this? And you'll find a book that has this and this and this, or this and this, but it doesn't have the whole list. And I just kept on being like, where's this book that has the whole list? Where's this book that has the whole list? And then I was like, I don't think it exists. I think you have to write it. And so then I just wrote down that list of every single thing that I had been looking for, and I put it into this book.
The idea of an unsettled witch and the thought process, behind, I guess, there's elitism in covens, right? Or at least in other covens. Catherine, she doesn't want to see any wrong in what she's doing or what Sylvia's doing. She really owes a lot to Sylvia. So she gives Sylvia a lot of grace for the things that she's sent to enforce. But there's a lot of muddy water in that. And there's a lot of, okay, how much are we saying, oh, well, Noctis is, and I'm making a face. We don't use we don't use video, but I'm making a snooty face. Julia sees it. And how much of what you're doing touches on some of the things you don't like about them, but you're just doing it a different way and calling it something else. That was a really interesting point. There is a hierarchy to things in this world. Was that one of the things you were really looking for? Was that on your list of things that you had to have in a book?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I really look for in a book is messiness. I really like when relationships and people's understanding and the way that people act is very very, very messy. I think that the way that we are as humans is very messy. We're not rational at all points. We are very hypocritical in the way that we act. We will do a thing and then go and accuse someone else and be very upset with them for doing the exact same thing and genuinely be upset with them for doing that thing. Like Catherine regularly accuses Silas of doing things that she is doing herself, and she's genuinely mad at him for doing them. And I think that that's something that's really real. And then I think that something else that was really important to me was recognizing how much the systems that we've come up with in and the people that we've been raised by can shape us and can shape our worldview, and how much those things can impact us without us even realizing them. So Sylvia built Catherine's entire world as far as the witching world. Noctis built Silas's entire world as far as the witching world. And I think that both of them are coming to understand that throughout the book in the same way that many of us, as we grow up into our 20s and 30s, come to realize that the things that you were taught in school weren't entirely true. The things that you learned from your parents were a very specific worldview that you were taught. And it doesn't mean that all of it's wrong, but it just means that you were brought up in a very specific silo, and that the way you came up through that silo taught you very specific things that weren't necessarily real. So I think that those were both important things for me that wound up being reflected in those relationships.
Could you talk a little bit also about the magic system and how it works in this world?
Yes. Yeah. So the magic system was really fun for me to come up with, and also very difficult. I am a huge outliner. This is the third book that I'd written. The first two were bad and they didn't go anywhere. And that was great. And I learned a ton from them. And I think that that's something really important as a writer. And when I got into this one, like the first one, I wrote from no outline at all. And that's why it was really bad. The second one, I wrote from kind of an outline and it was still pretty bad. And this one, I was like, I'm going to extremely outline the whole thing. And it really helped a lot. And the one thing that I left was that every time they did a spell, it just said in parentheses, they do spell. And it didn't explain at all what that looked like or what happened. And that was a problem. And it wound up working out. Sometimes procrastination helps. So the way that magic is done in the book is that Noctis, which is the head of all of the witch covens in the United States, creates spell books. And in those spell books, there are runes, and a witch can absorb a rune, and then they just cut into their hand and they do the spell. And the spell just goes out of them. And it's basically like a corporatized, mass-produced form of magic, essentially. So any witch essentially can do the spell. And there's some skill involved, like especially for harder spells. If you're better at focusing, you're able to do the spell better, you're able to carry it out better, it'll last longer, etc. But what they do is provide these spells that anyone can do. And that's how Noctis kind of maintains their control over all of the witches in the country. And what they kind of knocked aside when they brought in that system was what I call old magic, which is what we picture when we think of witches, which is, potions with all sorts of fun ingredients and all of that stuff, like family grimoires, all of that stuff that kind of has a culture to it and that has a uniqueness to it, but that would have been a lot less reliable, a lot harder to use, a lot harder to mass produce, a lot harder for people to get their hands on. So what Noctis gave you was, here's easy, and here's, plug and play, but you're going to lose a lot in the meantime. And coming up with that system kind of came at the same time that the rest of the story came. And I think that it wound up matching the story and the characters really well, which was nice. Yes, if that answer made sense. But what I learned from that was that sometimes procrastination is good, but also you should outline stuff.
There is some point of view changing within the story. The point of view is mostly through the eyes of Catherine, who is the first character we see, Sylvia, Silas, and then to a lesser degree, not so much point of view, but characters that are important are like Silas's best friend Annika, Catherine's best friend Fiona, other coven heads. Was it difficult for you to sort of get into those three mindsets, especially with all of them not really knowing things about each other that were important to why they reacted the way that they did, and putting it all in the same book, as opposed to maybe making it one person's point of view?
Um, I wouldn't say it was difficult. I think that it was somewhat, I don't think controversial is the right word, but when you read the book, the Sylvia point of view specifically was a point of view that was very important to me to include, and that was the most debated amongst like people who were giving me notes, and also amongst myself, like constantly in every draft. I was like, should I actually include this? Is this something that I want to? Because I think that the much more traditional version of the book wouldn't have included it. And for me, the reason that I wanted to include it is because I think that the book as a whole is an exploration of what power does to a person and does to a community and does to a system. And I think that Sylvia is a reflection of that in a very extreme and specific way, and in a way that was very, very interesting to me. And so, with that perspective, it was something that I thought about constantly. And it was something that I thought about with like every word and every sentence of like, do I include this or do I not include this? And I always just landed on the side of, I find it so much richer and more interesting to hear about this and to know about this and to know what's happening with her. On the Catherine and Silas front, I mean, like, just as a romance reader, I always love dual perspective romances. I like to hear what's happening on both sides. I find it just a lot more richer to just get into both of their heads and to understand on both sides, like, what their issues are, what obstacles they're overcoming. I think that you just get a lot more depth to both characters being in both of their heads. I think that it also expanded the world a lot more to get to see from Silas's side. You get to learn a lot more about Noctis as we go into book 2. You get to follow Silas to New York, to a lot of different places by having that perspective. So yeah, I think that with those three, there was definitely some difficulty balancing as far as like, what's everyone doing at every various time? That's always the hard thing with perspectives. But I think that it was important to me to showcase all three of their various sides of the world and all three of their various perspectives on the power that's at stake and the power that's at hand and what's at stake in this world.
Were you happy with the way that the pacing worked? Was that difficult for you to sort of figure out how much you were going to reveal about like Sylvia's backstory versus what was happening in the story? Did you have a lot of trouble with the timelines lining up in the right way narratively?
I mean, there's so much like, I would get out like a piece of paper and I would be like, let's do math on ages. But yes, I mean, I was happy with that. I think that one of the hard things to grapple with as a writer in today's day and age, and I work in television, so I'm working in a television writer's room right now for an upcoming like drama mystery series. And as I work on other books, one of the hardest things to grapple with as a writer now is that audiences are very, very smart and well read and well viewed. They have seen and read and watched everything, which means that they know what's going to happen. Like they know the tropes, they understand things, they can see where stuff is going. And so it's like, if you're trying to play a mislead, you have to understand that probably a lot of people are going to see through it. And so with some of the Sylvia things, it's like, okay, I recognize that a lot of the audience knows where this is going, even if I'm not directly telling them. And to me, as a reader, I would still be very, very interested in it, because to me, it's more the emotional arc than it is the mystery of it. And so that was what was most important to me, was making sure that from a character perspective, what you're reading with her was very engaging. And all you can ever do as a writer is write something that's interesting to you as a reader. And I was like, to me as a reader, this is exactly what I want, is to read exactly what this woman is feeling and exactly what she's been going through and exactly what she's been going through in her whole life. And I was like, how it laid out is like right what I would want.
So witches are a perennial favorite in various forms. What for you makes them so compelling that you needed to read this very particular story and write this very particular story about witches?
I think what's fun about magic is that it can be whatever you want. Like it's like, okay, and I love every supernatural creature, but it's like, what can a vampire do? It's somewhat limited. What can a werewolf do? It's somewhat limited. What can a witch do? Magic can be anything. Like, do you want your witch to be able to transform into a creature? You can decide that. Do you want your witch to be able to fly? You can decide that. Do you want them to be able to be invisible? You can decide that. Like, you have this whole just laundry list of whatever you want them to be able to do or not do can be possible. And I think that's so fun. And they're also humans, which I think is great. One of the things that was most important to me on that list of that I had been looking for was in today's day and age, was in today's world, was I wanted something that was in today's world and wasn't Portal or Portal adjacent. I think that a lot of even fantasy that's in today's world is like, it feels like you're stepping through a portal at least a little bit, where it's like, it's in today's world, but it's pretty separate. It doesn't feel like these are actually people who are walking amongst us. And it's like, I could be on the street and I could walk by a witch and I wouldn't know. So that's what's so fun to me. And you're also like, I could be a witch. I could become a witch tomorrow. Who knows? So they've always been just like one of my favorite magical creatures, because there's just a million different iterations of them that you can have. And you never get tired of them because you can just keep on going in different directions.
So what could we expect from the next book? What are you allowed to reveal?
Well, I just turned in a revision, so it's been very exciting to work on. I think that what's really fun moving forward in the series is that the world gets to just keep on getting bigger. I think that you get to keep on seeing new pockets of everything that's happening. And I've gotten as a writer to keep on discovering new pockets of everything that's happening. I think that there's so many different facets of this world, and there's so many different fun things to uncover, and there's so many different problems to uncover, and there's so many different like exciting things and soapy things and scary things and all these different corners that you get to travel into and that the characters get to travel into. I think that what happens at the end of book one blows the world open in a really big way, and you get to explore a lot of different areas because of it. So I'm very excited. I think that there's a couple action scenes in book two that are amongst my favorites. There's a couple of real life LA locations that they go to in book two that I think people will get a real kick out of. You also get to go to a couple of other cities in book two, which I think is really fun. There's a few new characters who I introduced in book two that I think people will like. There's a new perspective character amongst the characters who you already know, which I think will be fun as well. And some new romances.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to book two. Does it have a name, or is that something you're not allowed to say?
Name and release date and such are also still a secret.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was Jessikah with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest was Julia Bianco, and we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.